السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in many surahs in the Quran talks to us about the early times of the Muslims during the leadership of the Holy Messenger of God, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And it's very important for us to go to the Quran and reflect on these events so that we can try to draw parallels and learn from those experiences and try to apply them in the days that we're living. Because there's so many similarities. SubhanAllah, the Quran, so many situations that you can be in as individuals or communities that you actually find some answer, some solace in the Quran that you can refer to and that you can use so that you can be guided. One of these events in the early times of the Muslims was the Battle of Badr. The Battle of Badr. It was a very, very difficult time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us how He gave victory to the Muslims during that time. In Quran chapter 3 verse 123, Allah says, وَلَقَدْ نَصَرَكُمُ اللَّهُ بِبَدْرٍ وَأَنْتُمْ أَذِلَّةٌ. Indeed, God made you victorious at Badr when you were weak. You were weak, adillah. Allah doesn't say adillah how, in what sense were they weak? Obviously, they were outnumbered, for one. That's one kind of interpretation of this weakness. Another is the psychological weakness that they had. It was a very difficult time, very psychologically pressuring time. It would be the first battle that the Muslims would be having with Quraysh. Or Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and the message and the Muslims, they lived for 13 years in Mecca first and then 10 years in Medina. So in the second year in Medina, so that's the second year in Hijrah, they had this battle with Quraysh. And that would be the first confrontation that they would be having with Quraysh, which is the tribe that was so powerful, economically powerful, militarily powerful, the dominating tribe. They were rich, they were mighty. And not only in Mecca, but also in Arabia. They had a certain level of influence and control in whole of Arabia. So that obviously is something that would cause a psychological pressure. And despite the Muslims being weak, Allah tells us that He gave them victory. Allah later, or in other verses, He details how He gave them victory. He says, for example, in Surah Al-Anfal, that's Quran chapter 8, verse number 5. كما أخرجك ربك من بيتك بالحق وإن فريقا من المؤمنين لكارهون. The verse says, similarly, when your Lord brought you, O Prophet, out of your home for a just cause, a group of believers was totally against it. Allah is saying, بالحق, for a just cause, not haphazardly that these events happened. And Allah is saying how He prepared the circumstances actually for this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He wills something to be done, He willed that it occurs according to certain laws, certain circumstances that come together and things happen. That's how Allah created this world. This world follows laws. It's not haphazard. If you want to achieve victory, there is a way to achieve victory. Loss, there is a way. There are certain circumstances that when they come together, when they happen, then loss would happen. Or poverty, or wealth, or any conclusion or any result that you might be seeking, there needs to be certain conditions that need to be met. This is how Allah created this world. And often when you hear about the will of God in the Quran, you can remember this, that there are certain laws that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this world in. Not that, for example, as we think, kun fayakun is magic. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about these circumstances that led to the Muslims having to leave Medina and confront the Quraysh. How did they confront Quraysh? It was made known to the Holy Messenger of God, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that there would be a caravan of Quraysh led by Abu Sufyan. That caravan was a trade caravan coming back from Syria to Mecca. And it is narrated that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam consulted the companions, what do you think we should do? And Rasulullah actually decided that we should go and we should confront that caravan. But remember, Allah said bilhaq, by truth, by a just cause. It's not like, we attack that caravan like bandits do. Remember that Quraysh expelled the Muslims from Mecca. Expelled the Muslims from Mecca. Allah says in the Quran, لِلْفُقَرَاءِ الْمُهَاجِرِينَ الَّذِينَ أُخْرِجُوا مِنْ دِيَارِهِمْ وَأَمْوَالِهِمْ. They were expelled from their homes. Their wealth was confiscated by Quraysh. So now when we say that the Muslims are attacking that caravan, that's not like bandits do. It's actually a right that they have over this tribe. It's their money. It's their wealth that was confiscated and taken. So obviously there was an option and a possibility of a military confrontation as well. Because again, Quraysh is not just an economical superpower in Arabia. It was a military superpower in Arabia as well. So that was a possibility. And that possibility made some of this little group of Muslims, 313 Muslims, a small group of them, had this fear. Let me tell you what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about this in the Quran. وَإِنَّ فَرِيقًا مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ لَكَارِهُونَ. Allah continues in that verse that Allah dictated, or Allah took you, Allah brought you out of your home for a just cause. A group of believers were totally against it. وَإِنَّ فَرِيقًا مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ لَكَارِهُونَ. يجادلونك في الحق, the next verse. يجادلونك في الحق بعدما تبين كأنما يساقون إلى الموت وهم ينظرون. They disputed with you about the truth after it had been made clear, as if they were being driven to death with their eyes wide open. Thinking about that possibility that there might be a military confrontation with Quraysh, some people were shaken. Some people were fearing that. And it's a weakness that the community had. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing to that weakness. That when you tell them that we might confront them militarily, actually there is a possibility if you want to get your rights back, there might be a price that needs to be paid. So some people, it is as if you're taking them to execution. You know that the feet can't really move. Some people told the Messenger of God, well, O Messenger of God, this is Quraysh. Quraysh, they have never been defeated since they have become powerful. Some people had that kind of answer to the Prophet. So we need to acknowledge our weaknesses. We need to address them before we are able to actually correct or rectify. So this is one little lesson. The next verse says, وَإِذْ يَعِدُكُمُ اللَّهُ إِحْدَى الطَّائِفَتَيْنِ أَنَّهَا لَكُمْ. Remember, O believers, when Allah promised to give you the upper hand over either target, either the economical target or the military victory. Because both are possibilities now. If they want to go and attack that caravan, there might be also a military confrontation. And it was known to them, it seems, according to this verse, that, remember, O believers, when Allah promised you the upper hand over either target, and you wished to capture the unarmed party. So you wished to go with the easier solution. Allah says, وَتَوَدُّونَ أَنَّ غَيْرَ ذَاتِ الشَّوْكَةِ تَكُونُ لَكُمْ. And you were hoping that you would not have to go to the painful option. But it was Allah's will to establish the truth by His words and uproot the disbelievers. This was the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what happened was that Abu Sufyan, the leader of this caravan, he realized the plan. He realized the danger. And he decided to change his route. And he sent a message to Mecca for support, for protection. And Mecca, Quraysh in Mecca, they sent troops of 100 or 1,000 militants to protect the caravan. And when the caravan was protected, Abu Sufyan insisted that we need to attack these Muslims. We need to battle them and fight them. And indeed, there was a fight and a battle that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran in many verses how He sent victory. Inshallah, maybe in later days we'll discuss it. But the lesson here is this, is the next verse, or this verse that I recited, where Allah says in the end, لِيُحِقَّ الْحَقَّ وَيُبْطِلَ الْبَاطِلَ وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْمُجْرِمُونَ. لِيُحِقَّ الْحَقَّ وَيُبْطِلَ الْبَاطِلَ وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْمُجْرِمُونَ. To firmly establish truth. So that Allah firmly establishes truth and wipes out falsehood, even to the dismay of the wicked. The lesson is this, that many people ask, why does God not establish justice? Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not do something about all the massacres that we are seeing, about all the injustice, all the corruption, all the crimes that many people or sometimes nations or governments or countries are doing? Why does Allah not do something about it? That's a question that many of us say, many of us actually pose. Why does God not change something? This is where I want to take it to what I mentioned earlier. That Allah made this world in such a way that it operates according to laws. According to laws. If you want to achieve victory, if you want to achieve justice, if you want to achieve protection of the oppressed, if you want to support anyone who's oppressed, if you want the alleviation of the oppression, there are routes that one should take to do this. Those people at the time of the Battle of Badr, they thought that, well, we can gain our rights back, but for cheap, without having to suffer pain and difficulties. And Allah says, you're actually wishing that you won't have to go to the painful options, but Allah willed otherwise. So if Allah wants to يحق الحق, to establish truth, to establish justice, often it happens through the road of pain, the road of difficulty, difficult decisions, things that probably bring suffering onto you. When you're thinking about massive change in this world, it doesn't come except with massive pain and massive hardship and massive difficulties. This is one thing that we all need to remember when we want to apply it in our lives. Anything that you do, think about your circumstances here. When you want to say, I want to help in reducing the sufferings from the oppressed people in the world, the people in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Sudan, in Somalia, in so many different places. Think about what options you will have to go through to help achieving that goal. When we talk here about boycotting, for example, or divesting, sometimes these are painful or difficult decisions. They are disruptive to your day-to-day lives. They're disruptive to your routines. Sometimes you have to go and find, alternatives or a product that makes your life so easy. And it's sometimes, tiring to go and find these options and solutions. But you have to do it. Sometimes if you, for example, are told to divest your pension money, because I don't know if many of you know how the pension money is invested or where it is invested. Go look up. And you decide that I want to divest. I don't want, for example, my money to go to any associations or any institutions associated with Israel. Yes, you go, you might actually have to gain maybe less profit than the other ones. That's a decision that needs to be made in order to alleviate the suffering. But it also means that you will have to select the more difficult route. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us. But one of the lessons that He is teaching us, that when haqq needs to be established, when justice needs to be established, often there will be طريق ذات الشوكة, as it is called. Literally it means the road of thorns. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshaAllah, that He will give us patience and wisdom to select the routes that please Him in all aspects of our lives. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Salawat.